Hello, it's Lord Slaw here, and today I am doing 10 fairly random Big Finish recommendations. So, as some of you may realise, this is very similar to a video Stu Bagful made earlier this week, and well, I saw the video and I really wanted to make one of my own, because I've been wanting to make a Big Finish video for a while, but I can never think of a theme to base such a video around, because whenever I think of an idea, there's always the problem of, oh, well, I haven't heard this audio and this audio, because there's just so many Big Finish audios, it's difficult to keep up and difficult to have heard everything to be able to make any kind of comprehensive video on it. So I thought I'd just kind of go ahead and give my 10 random Big Finish recommendations that you can listen to in lockdown or afterwards, whenever. These are all just some fairly underrated stories that I think deserve some love and you should consider giving a download. So there's two rules. Firstly, it can't be audios I've already discussed, and there's some brilliant ones I've already discussed. Specifically, go watch my First Doctor Adventures Volume 2 review, as that has one of my favourite ever Big Finish stories, and it goes under the radar quite a lot. The second rule is it has to be kind of underrated ones, generally. There's kind of one which maybe you could say isn't underrated, but I just wanted to mention it anyway. So, without further ado, let's get on with the video. So the first story I'm going to talk about is Creatures of Beauty. I know Stu Bagful mentioned this in his video, but I felt I needed to recommend it too, because it is just such a good story, one of my favourite ever of all time. And yet it goes so under the radar, I never hear anybody talking about this story, and it is just excellent. It's one of the most bleak Big Finishes. It takes place on this planet which has had an ecological disaster where like an alien spaceship's I can't remember if it was the cargo or the fuel kind of ruptured in the atmosphere, and as a result, the species on the planet is dying out and their race is like deformed and disfigured, and it's pretty nasty. And then you throw the Fifth Doctor and Nicaea into that, which are a really good combo, especially as they're probably one of the most innocent Doctor-companion relationships in this really horrific scenario, and all sorts of horrible stuff goes on throughout the story. And it's told in a very inventive way, in the sense that it's all out of order, so you kind of hear scenes sometimes there after the end of after the point that you last heard or before the point that you last heard. It can take a little adjustment to get used to, but I think it really works, as it allows you to slowly piece together what's going on and who's doing what and what interests are where, and there's something just thoroughly entertaining to me about that. And also the fact that if you had heard the story in order, it would ruin the twist at the end, because one of the last scenes is actually what would in a traditional story be the first scene, and whoa, what it is such a massive gut punch when you hear that scene. It is one of the best twists I've ever seen in a Doctor Who story, and the fact that it has such profound kind of meta context, well, not meta context, but just kind of the questions it poses are quite difficult ones. I'm not going to say any more because I don't want to spoil it, but definitely go ahead and listen to Creatures of Beauty. It's only £2.99 for download. So the second story I'm going to recommend is the Council of Nicaea. So this is another Fifth Doctor story and has Peri and Erimem as companions, and Erimem's a really underrated companion. She's like an Egyptian pharaoh who started travelling with the Doctor, and her and Nicola Bryant have a great chemistry together. It's a shame we don't hear too much from generally as people talking about Erimem as a companion, and she's really good. I really like her. And this episode is just excellent. It's a pure historical about the early religious disputes in the Roman Empire just after it's Christianized, and it is excellent. It's one of those pure historicals which really delves into the society and politics of the day, and those are the kind that I thoroughly enjoy. And it has Erimem almost take a different side to the Doctor in a similar way to the Aztecs, and the way that plays out is really entertaining, and there's lots of really great characters, and as I said, just the world building is absolutely superb. It's everything you want from a pure historical, and honestly feels like it should be a Hartnell episode. That's how well it's done, but it's still really enjoyable. I shouldn't take anything away from Peter Davison, as he is great in it. Yeah, so I highly recommend the Council of Nicaea if you want your pure historical fix. So the next episode we have is Live 34. Now this is one of the ones where people might disagree with me saying it's underrated, but honestly, outside of my kind of close group of friends, I don't really hear a lot about other people who, really talk about this audio, and it is one of the best Big Finish I've ever done. It is superb. It's a Seventh Doctor story with Ace and Hex, and Hex is another one of those underrated Big Finish companions. He's really sweet and really nice, which makes a good contrast to Ace, who's quite belligerent. But anyhow, Live 34 is basically told as a radio program. So there's no like Doctor Who title sequence. It isn't from the perspective of the Doctor and his companions. It's through the perspective of listening to a radio show from this fictional colony where there's all sorts of mysterious, political machinations going on, all sorts of dark happenings. And it is brilliant. It's another one of those episodes which really delves into the world building. And that's something I love about Big Finish. Because they've got so much more time to play with and it's all like kind of voices and stuff, they often go really deep into building up the politics and society of the worlds they're in. And that is just something that's superbly entertaining. And that's brilliantly done here, especially through... It's through a medium that the people of this world would be listening to, which makes it all the more interesting. It's also kind of a slight jab at the BBC, which is a bit ballsy given that Big Finish rely on the license, getting the license for Doctor Who to make money, or to keep going. But it's really good, it's really well done. My only complaint is that towards the end, it kind of fizzles out a bit. It becomes a bit exposition heavy to end the episode, and really it should have perhaps been a little bit longer to allow them to have a more satisfying ending. But aside from that, it's brilliant, highly recommended. So for the next one, I'm going to cheat a little bit and include a whole trilogy. So if you didn't know, a lot of the main range, especially the later main range, tend to do things in terms of trilogies, so there'll be 3 runs of episodes which all have the same Doctor in, and it'll have an ongoing arc, whether it be with characters or with plot lines. Usually they're 3 distinct stories and you can just kind of go from, just have, listen to the second one and you don't really need to have any context or whatever. But sometimes you do. It all depends on the trilogy. And this trilogy is the Climb Trilogy. So I don't know how many of you have heard Colditz, which was an early Big Finish release, which is obviously set in Colditz Castle. And in that, one of the plot points was there was this female Nazi from like an alternate reality where the Nazis had actually succeeded, and in that world they were controlling it in the 1960s. I think that's the time period anyway. And the Climb Trilogy actually goes over Sylvester McCoy travelling with said Nazi from an alternate universe and hoping to almost change her views on the world. And it's really, really interesting. So the first one is 1,000 Tiny Wings, which is probably my favourite. That one's set in the 1950s in Nigeria during the Mau Mau uprising, which was quite a big event at the time. And that one's got such an amazing atmosphere. Just kind of being trapped in almost like, it's not necessarily that they're trapped in this house, it's just the fact that there's such a rural spreading surrounding that they can't really get out anywhere. There's a really good atmosphere in that story, and it's very enjoyable as a historical, and it has the kind of alien in it is a very good allegory for the British Empire and decolonisation. It's all very interesting. The next one is Survival of the Fittest, which is very much playing on themes of race and Darwinism and all of that. Overall, it's a pretty good story. And it was very interesting with the way it plays with Klein's morality and how she sees the world, and that stuff is definitely the best part of the story, and it's a good one. And the final one is the Architects of History, which basically Klein gets a hold of the TARDIS and is able to use it. And wow, this one is where everything just goes up to 100, and it's about her trying to change reality. So like it's having the Nazis back in power, and then all of a sudden this invading force of aliens, and it's all really good stuff. Highly recommended. Definitely give them a listen. So next audio I'm going to recommend is The Suffering. There's a lot of companion chronicles I could have chose because I really love that range, and their first Doctor trilogies are excellent, but I feel they generally have a pretty good reputation among the Big Finish listening community. But if you haven't heard them already, go listen to them. This one is The Suffering, which is a really good audio. It's got some good themes in terms of because it's set when the suffragettes were protesting for the right to vote just before the First World War, and that's all good. But my favourite thing about this story is the comedy. It's so funny. It's a two-hander between Maureen O'Brien and Peter Purves, and they do a really good job of capturing the setting and capturing the comedy. There's so many great moments in this story that I just can't help but recommend it. There's some scenes which just vividly stay in my mind, even though I haven't listened to it for 2 years or 3 years or something. They still stick in my mind just because they were so hilarious, and I love it. It's a great story. Highly recommended. Point of Entry is the next story, and this is part of the Lost Stories range, where they recreate scripts which had either been proposed or written as Big Finish audios but never got made. And there are so many stories I love. in this range. I really enjoy it, especially the authenticity which shines through. One of my favourite ever Doctor Who stories is Farewell Grey Maston, but I recommended that in my best Big Finish story for each Doctor. So in this one we're doing Point of Entry, which is part of the first series of the Lost Stories, which means it's a Colin Baker one, part of the Lost Season 23, and this one is brilliant. So the original idea was by Barbara Clegg, who wrote Enlightenment, and the script is written by Mark Platt. So essentially it's Barbara Clegg's ideas written by Mark Platt, which obviously two great Doctor Who writers combined to make a fabulous, fabulous story. It's got such great mood and atmosphere. It's set during Tudor England, and part of the story is that there's this weird Aztec treasure that's been brought back from the New World, and it's causing all sorts of demonic goings on, and I love it a bit. There's just something about the world building, the atmosphere, and the characters that just make this such a fun and likeable story, and highly recommended. Utter pure quality and fairly authentic for the time period, as in, the Colin Baker's time period as the Doctor. Brilliantly done. So I've got another companion chronicle for my next recommendation, and it's Second Chances. You do kind of need the context of earlier Zoe companion chronicles for this, but not really. You can more or less just be summed up as Zoe is regaining some of her memory that was wiped by the Time Lords, because obviously she's got that kind of really logical mind that can remember things really well. And that's what was kind of happening in some of the earlier audio that she was in. And this is kind of the culmination of that, when she's kind of getting her memory back. And it is so brilliantly tense, with so many great ideas, and such a great character moment for Zoe. I just absolutely adore it. It's one of those Big Finishes that really manages to ramp up the stakes and just make something that's really great on a character level. I thoroughly enjoy it, and it's definitely one I'd recommend out of the Companion Chronicles, especially for Second Doctor fans, as unfortunately there isn't an awful lot of great Second Doctor content by Big Finish. The Two Masters is my next recommendation, and this is another one where people might criticise me saying that, oh, well, this is one that's fairly well known about and liked, but I just wanted to talk about it anyway because it's a brilliant story. It's the last in the trilogy following on from You Will Obey Me and Vampire of the Mind. Although I wouldn't necessarily say that they're essential for listening to The Two Masters. It can be listened to without it. And The Two Masters is absolutely amazing. It's one of those stories which has so many mind-breaking twists and turns, with so many brilliant ideas thrown at the wall, and I love it to pieces. And it's a great one for the Master specifically, because it has Alex McQueen's Master and Geoffrey Beevor's Masters, which are two sorely underrated masters, both of which deserve plays back on TV. I'd definitely like to see Alex McQueen in New Who. That would be amazing, because he is simply superb casting as the Master and plays a very different Master from what is usually. And that's what's so good about this Two Masters, is kind of seeing what two Masters playing off each other would be like. And it really wasn't what I expected at all, in the best of ways, and I loved it bits. Definitely a recommended one. And check out You Will Obey Me and Vampire of the Mind if you have enough money to, because they were pretty good as well. Domain of the Bird is the next recommendation, and I know it's another William Hartnell one, but despite the fact that there's no William Hartnell to actually voice for Big Finish, he surprisingly has a lot of great Big Finish content for his Doctor, and this is no exception. So this is part of the Early Adventures range, which is basically mostly full cast Troughton and Hartnell stories in the style of the main range, but with a bit of narration. It's kind of almost a fusion of the Companion Chronicles and the main range to kind of make longer in length Troughton and Hartnell stories of Big Finish, and most of them are pretty good, but not too many are outstanding. But this is definitely one of the outstanding ones. It's not necessarily the most thought-provoking Doctor Who story, or one that's really going to change your perspective on the show or on life or anything like that. It's just a fun, pulpy action story with some good ideas thrown in there. This turns the Verd from just these weird leather gimps you see in the Keys of Marinus, which admittedly I have nothing against because the Keys of Marinus is great, but it turns them from just being that into being great. It really develops who they are, their religion, their kind of cult, what they do, what they are, which by the way is really dark and pretty nasty, and I love it to bits. And the Verd definitely are not the Cybermen. I do not buy that, because that's something that the comics pushed and Stephen Moffat tried to make canon in The Doctor Falls. But yeah, so this is a great action story, and it's really fun to listen to. I especially like what they did with Ian and Susan. Susan gets some interesting interactions with one of the Verd, who she kind of develops a little bit of a, almost, I wouldn't say friendship, but just some kind of more kind of mutual respect for in a really trying circumstance. It's interesting, and obviously Ian goes around being the action hero, which is always fun. Get them into the Verd. It's a good story. And finally, we have A Storm of Angels. So A Storm of Angels is from the Unbound range, which is by far one of my favourite Big Finish ranges. It's basically these what-if questions, like what if something was different about the Doctor or the nature of his travels or blah 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 blah. And almost all of them have like a new actor playing the Doctor, which is really great to see. And honestly, I recommend all of them that I've heard. I haven't heard He Jests at Scars and Exile, but from what I've heard, they aren't very good anyway. But the rest of them, all brilliant stuff, and I'm recommending this one today. So this one has Geoffrey bailed as an alternate First Doctor. A First Doctor who kind of stayed on Gallifrey a lot longer and became a bit of a softer First Doctor, which is really nice to see. I think he plays a really good Doctor, and I'm so sad that he's gone, because I would have loved to have more audios with him as the Doctor in. And Carolyn Ford, who plays Susan as the companion, funnily enough, which is quite good. And so the premise of this one is, what if the Doctor actually changed time? And it kind of gets into, part of the premise is how in the Aztecs, they obviously didn't go via Barbara because the Doctor spent longer on Gallifrey first, but just went to the Aztecs and like gave them a hand with some technology to kind of, help them fend off Cortez and the Europeans. And then he lands on like a Tudor spaceship that's against the Mayan Alliance in space, and like they're bringing back Aztec gold from outer space, and there's just all sorts of really crazy ideas like that. It's a surreal experience almost, but it's brilliant. Highly recommended. It's one of those audios which has a kind of grandiosity about it that's fully earned, and it's interesting to see a story that more kind of plays with the themes of what happened to the Doctor changes time, but removing itself outside of the rigours of dealing with canon and all of that kind of stuff. It manages to play with an interesting idea without making it have grand implications for the rest of the show, which I think there's something to be admired about that, and I love it. Well, I hope you've enjoyed that rather off-the-cuff video. As I said in my last video, I'm still quite bogged down with uni work, but come June, I'll be able to start making some more scripted and analytical videos again. But still, I hope you've enjoyed this, and I hope you listen to some of the audios I have recommended, and I will see you back next time in another video.